Today we're going to look at this small book about John Van Eyck called Van Eyck in Detail. It's part of the Portable series. This fascinating book looks at the works of Flemish painter John Van Eyck, 1395 to 1441, under a magnifying glass. Each panel is a collection of minuscule details rendered with superb clarity from foreground to background, or at least that is our first impression. As this book reveals, that is precisely where Van Eyck's exceptional talent lies. He's understood that, where necessary, the human brain is able to supplement its visual perception. In this richly illustrated book, details from Van Eyck's paintings are organized by such themes as nature, architecture, daily life, fabrics, glass, jewelry, mirrors, and portraits, opening with a biographical note and an introduction on the technique of oil painting on panel. The authors explain the significance of the individual details and how Van Eyck achieved his innovative artistic results. This is an unprecedented look at the work of a popular master. John Van Eyck is one of the most famous Northern Renaissance painters. This was the era in art history when religious iconography started to be phased out in favor of portraiture of everyday people. And sometimes they overlapped, meaning a portrait of an everyday person might be painted as a figure from the Bible. It was also very common to paint on panel at this time versus on canvas or linen, which happened later. This is one of his most famous works, the Ghent altarpiece. It's huge. I think this is it with the doors closed. And then here's with the doors open. They think this is a self-portrait, but they're not sure. 1433. This is at the National Gallery in London. This is another one of his most famous works. It's actually quite small. I think this is only 20-something or 30-something inches this direction. Let's see if it says. Oh, it's in centimeters. 60 centimeters. No, 82. 60 by 82 centimeters. This is again at the London National Gallery, or the National Gallery in London. artist thought that they were wealthy merchants, and that this painting was very much a status symbol. In this portion of the book, they're just showing us the full scale of all the paintings that later on they're going to show details of. Let's try to skip ahead to the details because it's more interesting. In this portion of the book, they talk about how he changed the way that artists used to oil paint. Some people call him the father of modern day oil painting, but it's not exactly true. People were painting with oil beforehand. It's just that the way that he did it revolutionized and forever changed how artists worked with oil paints moving forward. It's kind of hard to see, but look at the rainbow in this angel's wings and lilies. Lilies often show up in paintings of this era as a symbol, I think, for like purity. Exquisitely painted jewels and ribbons and gold. Now, what's interesting about this gold leaf is that it looks like gold leaf, but it's not. It's really just different pigments that he used right next to each other. When you see the painting in person, you can see almost like hash marks of the paintbrush and the different shades of gold, not true gold, like ochre and mustard yellows and things like that, to get the impression of this glowing pigment. These are some close-ups from the Ghent altarpiece. Again, we have some lilies over here in the corner. In the Last Judgment, the Archangel Michael stands in gilded armor on the edge of hell, which is surrounded by a threatening skeleton. The damned are dragged, devoured, and ripped apart by gruesome devils and monsters. The York diptych, the Last Judgment. Van Eyck's realism is enhanced by a spirited corpse of his holy figures, not only prominent ones like the Virgin, but also secondary figures that are clearly his invention. For example, the music-making angel give the viewer the impression that they are living, breathing creatures. In his portraits, John Van Eyck succeeded in representing people as living beings with an overwhelmingly realistic presence that had not been seen in Western art since Roman times. The donors of the Ghent altarpiece, I'm going to mispronounce this, Husvid and Elizabeth Parrot, kneeled in prayer before statues, the two St. Johns to whom they turned their gaze. The scene is one of devotion and concentration. Imperfections and villain skin and his wrinkled hands portray his advanced age. Although their costumes are expensive, the red and pink color accents add to the sobriety of the altarpiece when closed. What's also interesting about these paintings, of course, is that you get to see the kinds of things that people wore, this elaborate headpiece, and how her hair is braided into these cones on either side. This is probably the 15th century. Let's see if it gives a date. Oh, this one is part of the Ghent altarpiece. This was done by many, many layers of glazes and thin layers of paint to get this like luminosity to the skin. It's many, many layers of thin oil paint. A drawing for this painting. You know, a lot of times now people take photographs, artists take photographs and work from photographs. Back then, if they were painting somebody who couldn't stay seated for the entire portrait session, they would do a drawing, and they might get somebody else to sit, and an artist assistant maybe, to sit for the clothes. I mean, this one is not showing much of the clothes, but just generally. Let's skip ahead a little bit. Nature. This is sort of a dark print, but that's like a dog, like a little yip yip dog. his innovation in the art of painting, he observed floral and fauna in their natural environment under specific light conditions. The accuracy with which he achieved his breathtakingly convincing realism is based on a thorough understanding of structure and visual perception. It looks as if everything from the foreground to the horizon reveals itself in minuscule detail. However, when observed under magnification, it becomes clear that much depends. I think what they're saying is it's like an early form of impressionism, whereas when things go further back into space, and it's something that we take for granted now in painting, where what's seen in the distance is less finely rendered, but it doesn't need to be, because your eye and your brain make the leap to believing it. There's the lily again. The white highlights of the lilies suggest their soft materiality. As one of the most common symbols of the purity of the Virgin, they appear in Annunciated scenes. By varying their position, Van Eyck enhances the lifelikeness of the scene. This one, they almost look translucent. You can see that over time the paint has cracked. Here we have a green parrot. The green Indian parrot was believed to cry Ave as in Ave Maria. Each hair of Arnolfini's dog seems to be painted individually. Now, architecture. The great art historian Erwin Panofsky anachronistically described John Van Eyck's vision as a combination of microscopic and telescopic observation. Close by, details are represented with the utmost realism, while those on the horizon are equally convincing in the representation of space. It's beautiful. This one almost looks like a photograph. I love the floors. This time period is also when they're starting to understand perspective. Things getting smaller as they recede in space, and they really played into it. Many of the painters of this time really played would like to have these tiles now. I think they're beautiful. Daily life. This is a close-up of the mirror that's on the wall of that painting, the portrait of Arnolfi. I'm never going to get that right. Arnolfini. And art historians say that in the very center of this painting is actually, of this mirror on the wall in this painting, is a self-portrait of John Van Eyck standing there. Because there's the subject in the back. What's interesting about this chandelier is that you can see something very similar from the same time period hanging from the ceiling at the cloisters, at the Met cloisters. Oh, I love this too. These are the shoes. Wooden clogs and slippers. Now I think the way it worked is that these wooden clogs were worn by people over their other shoes. Many shoes at this time period were fabric and more fragile, more delicate than the shoes we have today. So they wore these wooden clogs as overshoes to protect their shoes from the mud when they walked on the street. And so they're actually quite big because this leather strap, they went over the person's shoes. And you can almost see the mud on them in this painting. And then these slippers would be, I think, the house slippers. Oh, that's nice close-up of the tile and the rug. brush strokes are representing the fibers of the embroidery of this coat or gown or whatever you would call it. Can you see that?